Half a century after the Celtic invasion, Rome suffered another calamity as humiliating as the previous one. The entire Roman army surrendered to the enemy, the Samnites, a mountain tribe living in the central part of the Apennine Peninsula. This was a more serious threat to the existence of Rome than the one in which the city was without walls during the barbarian invasion. In the year 321, two consuls led their legions and marched with them southward. The Samnites had recently suffered a heavy defeat and now obediently asked for peace. The Senate refused to negotiate with them, so the Samnites became desperate and decided to take revenge. They ambushed the advancing Romans in a ravine called Kavdinsky Forks. According to Livy, this place was a wide marshy, grassy glade, which was surrounded by steep wooded hillsides. It was possible to enter the glade only from the west and from the east through two narrow gorges. The experienced Samnite commander, Gaius Pontius, secretly brought his army here and camped near this place. He sent 10 soldiers dressed as shepherds with flocks of sheep to the pastures near the Roman outposts. Each time they met Roman troops, they told them that the Samnite army was fighting far to the south in Apulia. Rumors of this had been spread in advance, and the reports of the shepherds were only supposed to confirm them. The ruse worked, and the consuls decided to pass to the Samnite legions the shortest way, through the Caudine Forks. The Romans entered the western gorge and, as they passed through, found the eastern gorge littered with felled trees and huge stones. Above the gorge they saw detachments of Samnites. The Romans rushed back, but the path by which they had entered the Caudine Forks was similarly obstructed by rubble and armed men. The trap had slammed shut. The consuls ordered their legionaries to build a Roman camp, digging ditches, pouring in fortifications, and putting up a perambulation, though many realized it was no longer worthwhile. Meanwhile, the Samnites, not believing their own success, did not know what to do next. Pontius sent a letter to his father, the experienced old man Gerenius Pontius, to ask for advice. Gerenius replied, "My advice would be that you should let all the Romans leave freely." His opinion was immediately rejected, and again they asked for advice. Then Gerenius said, "Kill every last one of them." Pontius decided that his aged father had weakened his mind, and yielded to the general wish that the old man should be brought to the camp and personally asked for advice. The latter refused to change his mind and justified his words. Livius writes, "Giving the first advice, he said, from my point of view the best, I sought that such a great favor to ensure eternal peace and friendship with the most powerful people. The meaning of the second advice was to save many generations from war, as the Roman state will not soon regather its forces. The third solution is not at all. And if the Samnites to choose the middle way and let the Romans go unharmed and at the same time by the right of war to bind them as defeated by certain conditions?" Gerenius disagreed. "It is just such a solution that friends will not create and enemies will not destroy," he said. "The temper of the Romans is such that having been defeated, they no longer know peace." His advice was again rejected and he was sent home. The Romans made a number of unsuccessful attempts to break out. Food supplies were running low, and the consuls sent ambassadors to Pontius to negotiate terms of peace. If they didn't get peace, they would fight. "You Romans are never able to reconcile yourselves to your fate, even when defeated and taken prisoner," replied the Samnite commander. "So I will drive you away under a yoke undressed and unarmed, the symbolic yoke being an arch formed of 3 spears under which the soldiers were to pass in exchange for their release." It was also said that the Romans should get out of the Samnite domain and destroy their 2 outposts at Cales and Frigels. This was an indelible disgrace, but in the opinion of the consuls, better than the total annihilation of the Roman army. Livius assures us that the Samnites obtained only a sworn promise by the consuls of Rome's acceptance of such terms. The final agreement was to be accepted after approval by the popular assembly in Rome. The gullible Pontius accepted this condition and allowed the legions to leave. However, he demanded 600 Roman horsemen as hostages. Then there was a dramatic scene. The consuls, almost naked, were first chased away under the yoke. Then the same dishonor was subjected to each commander in the order of seniority, and finally, one by one, all the legions. Around, showering the Romans with profanity and ridicule, stood armed enemies and even swung now and then swords, and if anyone did not express their appearance of proper humiliation, the insulted victors struck them and killed. The troops returned to Rome. Many people began to observe mourning. No feasts or marriages were held. Merchants closed their shops and stopped doing business in the Forum. The citizens elected new consuls, and the senators held hearings to confirm the terms of peace. One of the defeated military commanders advised his comrades in arms not to make dishonorable excuses because they had acted while stranded in an enemy ambush. He further concluded that as honest warriors, he and the other commanders involved in the act should be extradited to the Samnites. All agreed to this, but Pontius refused to accept their surrender. He argued that if the agreement was invalid, then everything should go back to the original position, that is, all the legions should return to the Caudine Forks. Will you here, too, as always, find an excuse, having been defeated, not to honor the treaty? He asked. You made peace with us to recover the captured legions, and this peace you consider null and void. But you always cover deceit with the appearance of some lawfulness. One cannot but agree with this judgment, which is notable also because it was Livius, the most patriotic of Roman historians, put these words into the mouth of the commander of the Samnites. The Romans held integrity in very high esteem. In this case, they claimed to have adhered to the letter of the law, but one man with a sense of guilt expressed what everyone felt, that they had not adhered to its spirit. As if the Romans felt no gratitude to the Samnites for allowing their legions to leave, and actually acted as if they were victims of some arbitrary act. The war was resumed, and the Romans, according to tradition, won a glorious victory. They had now forced Pontius and his fellow captives to pass under the yoke, a remarkable example of mirror retribution. The defeat at Caudine Forks and its aftermath is a useful reminder that, despite their high principles, the Romans may well have committed cynical acts for their own gain. They condemned Pontius for leading the Roman army into a trap, but throughout history many Roman commanders had done exactly the same thing. Dion Cassius reasoned, and his assessment is not far from the truth. It is not necessarily the one who acts unjustly who wins. The decision here is made by the war itself, and this decision will always be in favor of the victor, who often does what is contrary to the law, considering it just.